going, and it's like pure. It's done that thing where like Terminator movies done it, like the Alien movies done it. Any movie series, when it gets old enough, it just becomes a caricature of itself. It just starts. They take the moments that you liked from the previous movies, they inflate it till it's absolutely putrefying, and they just keep milking it for as much as it can. Which is a bit of a fucking sad place to leave this discussion about Pirates of the Caribbean. It's because, as I said, the first three are brilliant, and I think the way to look at this is just that there only are three Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Yeah, well, in my mind, there definitely are anyway, because the fourth one was a dog shit. Now that you've said that about the fifth one, I think I might have seen that one, but it was so forgettable that
Really, yeah.
I've like totally forgotten what happens in the movie. I think at the end there's like a bit where like the sea separates and they're like at the bottom of a cavern and they're like trying to get a trident or something.
They're trying to get Poseidon's trident, which contains all the sins of man or some bullshit like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see how the first one where it was like, oh, there's a curse in Aztec gold, and then by the fifth one it's like we're trying to get Poseidon's trident and it contains all the sins of man. It's like, and there's like they've like partied the sea and one of them's like a ghost and it's still Jack and he's like, where's the rum gone? And it's like,
stop it, Daddy! Stop it! You're killing it.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Another week, another Canadian residential school found. Lewis, Justin, I apologised again.
Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I suppose what more can he say at this point? I guess I don't really know what he can do.
Yeah, he can't come out and admit that this has been a fucking cover up. That he's, the day he was sworn in, he was made aware of all this information and legally was bound to never speak of it again.
Oh, you think there's like a book, like what's that film, National Treasure, where they find out about the president's book and it's got all the secrets in it? He's like one of those for the Canadian Prime Minister.
I don't know. Honestly, to me, the Canadian residential schools, man, like it seems so far fucking flung across that entire country. I just don't see how the Prime Minister couldn't have been like appraised of this situation. And good for Justin, man, because he's hanging in there.
That seems realistic though, that the government has like a list of the catastrophes that have happened that no one's found out about yet, and it's like the apology's been pre-written for it,
it's just, this is like the damage control.
As soon as you get sworn in, it's like, okay, they haven't found out about this one yet, we think they might find out about this one soon, so that might be on you, sort of thing.
A cell in Montreal is onto us, fucking watch yourself.
Yeah, they're going on about that in the 4chan article, the forums and stuff like that. Yeah,
the anonymous hacker
hasn't quite hit Reddit yet, but we're worried it might. So if you didn't know, this is Guide to the 21st Century, a conversational podcast between two friends, Lewis and I, discussing topical issues and trying to navigate the minefield that is life in the 21st century.
Each week so far, Scott and I went away and thought of a topic that's been on our mind during the week, and then we bring that to the episode. We'll kind of disseminate our views, break it down a little bit, and the idea is that with this topic, we'll try and reach a conclusion with our other person that we weren't able to achieve on our own.
Yeah, so your topic's a bit happier than Canadian residential schools this week.
Yeah, this is a surprisingly happy one for me. It was actually you that brought it to my attention last week. You said that I've not done my how to keep your fans happy yet, and I've actually had like a couple written down since episode 1 that I've wanted to talk about, but each week I've just chosen to talk about the probably somewhat more serious stuff. So this week I was like, fuck it, yeah, let's go for it. So I want to talk about the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, which I think are fucking amazing.
Well, we I think we did think we thought the first one was amazing, definitely, but there was one specific time that you and I discovered that in fact the trilogy itself is unbelievable.
Yeah, that was actually something of like an awakening moment for us, I think. So like, the first movie came out in 2003, so we were both really, really young when this came out, and I think we were probably both in the same boat. We'd like seen it so many times, but we'd never really properly engaged with it. And then it was like years after that, and you and I, we were on holiday with my parents in Spain, playing table tennis one night, and we start talking about reminiscing about Pirates of the Caribbean. And then next thing you know, we're like, okay, we got to watch these movies. So obviously we're in Spain. We don't have a DVD player, don't have a television or anything like that, but we do have an iPad Mini and a pirate website. So turn all the lights
up. 8-inch screen. We're sitting on the couch with a bag of crisps or something like that. Just like scrunched into this tiny little screen.
Yeah, exactly. And that was definitely where I had the realization that like, oh my God, I think this trilogy might actually be pretty goddamn amazing without even realizing it before.
I think everyone has that opinion about the first movie. Everyone thinks the first movie is
Right.
great, but it starts to like lose them when the films get a bit deeper, and it's like, oh, actually, this is like a really magical, spiritual world, and there's like a lot of things going on here. I think a lot of
Hmm.
people lose it at that, but that almost makes it even. The second movie is like amazing as well in its own right. Like it's like every other
Right.
trilogy where the first one kind of stands on its own, and it's like this could have worked as a standalone movie, fine. But then the second and third ones open up the trilogy of events that happen, and they're like a contained story within themselves that kind of spans
Mm.
across all three. So yeah, it's got that really classic formula, but it works really well.
Yeah, it's actually, I think it's a really brilliant example of that, because it doesn't happen too often these days where you'll have a movie which is very much designed as a standalone. Because like, people might probably people know by now, but like this was the first Disney movie in which the ride was made before the movie. There was actually a ride at Disney World which was like Pirates of the Caribbean, and they decided, I don't know how the fuck they decided this, but they were like, let's base a movie off that. That
I
could be
think it
cool.
was Walt Disney's favorite ride in the park.
Really?
Yeah, I think, and I've been on the ride, and it
No way.
fucking sucks. It's like, well, it's it's like it's bad now because it's like really old.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
super old. So it's like it's like this really slow boat journey where you jump into the ship, and it's like a really, it's just winding, kind of like takes you around, and there's like stuff happening. So
Like a
it
lazy
was like
river type.
it was like before before roller coasters were a thing. Before it was like these 3D
Mm.
simulations. It was like you just hopped in, and there was like effects. The cannons go off, and there's like pirates fighting on the ships and stuff like that. And as you're like crawling around on this little
Uh-huh.
track in the water. So yeah, it doesn't really stand up today, but it's like a good relic of like something
Well,
of the
yeah.
past.
See, I'd like to go on the ride just because I
Yeah,
know the
yeah.
movies now. I'd be looking for like references and stuff like that. That would be the best part.
I think
But like, so
we went on it twice just because, just because it was the Pirates of the
it's
Caribbean ride.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. It's become, the first movie was absolutely iconic. And that's like, that's a question right there. Like, why? Why did that even happen? Like, because this movie to me, it seems like lightning in a bottle. This first one, it'll never be recreated throughout time, because like it came out at a time where like pirates, actually looking back, were unpopular back then. Like the closest attempt at a pirate movie was Treasure Planet, which is like the recreation of Treasure Island, and that fucking really sunk, and that was by Disney as well. And then this movie came out, and all of a sudden it just like captured people's imagination. Just from that one movie, the first instance of it, do you think you can speculate on where that came from?
Mm, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I think pirates are
Hmm.
just like a cool setting. I think it's something that people. I guess there's something about like the pirate lifestyle that's like quite easy to fantasize about because you almost kind of see from the beginning that these people have like no responsibilities. They just kind of go. They're like
Pure
they
freedom,
kind of go
isn't it?
with the wind sort of thing, like literally as well. Jump
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
ship
yeah.
and they just head off somewhere. They kind of do whatever they want. They don't pay taxes. They don't have a job. They don't have anywhere they have to punch at 9 o'clock. They just kind of do
Mm.
this thing that they all love doing. So I guess I understand what it's like from like a fantasy point of view to be a pirate, to be, I guess, as free as that.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
also has like amazing action sequences, like at the very beginning where you've got like Johnny Depp comes in as his character, and there's like this chase scene in the original sort of location. There's loads of good action scenes in the water, so it's like a good action movie as well. It's
Hmm.
got a lot
Hmm.
of like humor interspersed
Yeah.
throughout as well. It seems like it's written quite well. It's it seems well paced as a movie, I guess. Like there's no point where you think to yourself, "Oh, it's getting a bit slow now."
Yeah.
I think the movie is just like really good. I think it's a really good critical film to like look at and
Yeah.
be like, "This is actually a great movie."
Yeah, I've realized when I've been looking back at this movie again, like as I said, I fucking loved Pirates of the Caribbean. When I was a kid, I've seen it like literally dozens and dozens of times just because we had the DVD. It was one of those ones that keeps going back on. But yeah, I think it's actually like a well, really well put together movie. But and you're right. I think it's like there's lots of like the foundational stuff, like everything in the movie. If you see a gun, that gun's going to get used. If there's a plot hook, the plot hook's going to get picked up. There are these like important things, and every single character is like actively driving the story forward. So it's like I think it's great in that regard. But personally, see, for me, I think the thing that made this movie brilliant, like the lightning in the bottle aspect, was Jack Sparrow,
Oh,
played by Johnny Depp. I think without Johnny Depp playing that role, this movie simply would never have been what it was. And I actually think this first movie is just like Jack's movie. You know, this for me perfectly kind of epitomizes who Jack is. It's almost like a snapshot for, like, you know, 6 months of his life, just the random shit he gets up to, and it's like this crazy roller coaster, and it like begins at the very, very start of this film, because this is probably my best introduction for a character ever coming on screen. It's like you've got the music playing in the background, da, 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 and you've fucking got Jack coming through the water, and he's just like, the first time you see him, he's like this shady looking ruffian that's got fucking like eyeshadow on. He's got these dreads in his hair, you know, and he's like wearing this crazy pirate costume. You're like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, he looks quite noble. Next thing you know, he just hops down and he's in a wee dinghy. He's like chucking out the water out the side of it. He's like, okay, this guy's a bit of a rogue. Looks over, sees the dead pirate. It's like, tips his hat. You know, it's like, that's who he is. At his very core, like, he's a pirate, and he has his own like warped sense of honor. I don't even know how it works, but you kind of learn about that as the series goes on. As he's coming into the dock, well, actually, in the right hand side of the screen, you see the Intercessor, which is the ship that he's here for in the first place. So in the very first scene, you see Jack's motivation, you know, and then as the ship rides in, it just starts slowly sinking in the water, and then perfectly timed, when he reaches the dock, he just takes that one step off, and that, like, everything about that epitomizes who Jack is. Like, you think he's got no fucking clue what's going on, but it was perfectly planned, you know?
I don't know. I'm not even sure the Interceptor is like. I don't think that's his reason for being there. I just think this is like. It's just a sort of like chaotic moment in his life, and as the ship's like sinking, he's coming into dock, and he looks over, he sees the ship, and he's like, "That's my ticket out of here," sort of thing.
Really?
And then the cogs start turning. I don't think he like comes to Port Royal to like steal that ship. I think he comes. It just happens to be here, and he's like, his boat's sinking. He's like, "I'm going to have to go into the dock now." He looks over, he sees it, and he's like, "Yeah, that's how I'm going to get like back that way," sort of thing.
Sure, yeah, yeah, okay, I guess I see what you mean. Like, he probably didn't travel thousands of miles to steal that specific ship. He just headed to a dock to find a boat, and the very first scene he's there, he's like, found the boat. That's what I'm going to be doing. And this kind of like, for me, it kind of epitomizes why Jack is so great as well, because you've got like the weird, like the Johnny Depp stuff going on the whole time, which is like fucking bizarre, you know, but I like it, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on, yeah. I fucking like it. But like, this character, in every scene he's in, he's the one pushing towards the next scene, you know. So he turns up, he's like looking towards, like, his whole motivation in this entire movie is get the pearl. See all like the Aztec gold stuff and all that. That's almost like a side thing for him, because it's just about getting the pearl. The first thing he does when he gets in that island, he goes and scouts out the Interceptor and the
Dauntless, I think it is.
Dauntless, there we go, yeah. Like that, the very, very first scene he does, like, he goes straight over there and checks it out. And like, actually, that's in that very, very first scene, when he's thinking about like how he's going to steal these boats and kind of scouting out a little bit, that's where he meets Elizabeth, and you learn a little bit more about his character, because it's like, obviously he's a pirate, he's a ruffian, he's a murderer, but he's not going to let this random woman die just because she fell in the water. So he dives in, gets this woman, gets her out of the water, and then Norrington turns up, who's Elizabeth's basically to be wedded to, and looks up this guy up and down. He's obviously a pirate. Immediately tries to arrest him. Jack then threatens the life of the woman he just nearly lost his life saving. You know, like, he's just like, he's willing to save this other person, but as soon as it comes for his life, like, that's up here. There's nothing more important for him. And it's just, yeah, one of the brilliant examples of this fucking movie, and every single scene setting up Jack to be the focal point of this movie.
One of the things about the whole trilogy that I think people overlook is, I think it's assumed that Jack is pretty much lucky in the things that he's doing. It's like things just happen around him by coincidence. But I kind of get the impression that Jack is like this hyper intelligent character, that loves this pirate life and is always like drunk, but is this really like highly efficient drunk, where he's like really high functioning at the same time. Yeah. So he's like drunk all the time. He loves this lifestyle, but he's also like plotting the whole time, because you're right, as soon as he arrives in the dock, he like sees the ships and a plan's starting to like formulate in his mind. And that's pretty much the entire trilogy. Every scene that Jack's in, it's like a plan is like formulating in Jack's mind, and he's got double crosses and triple crosses going on all the time. And it's, you're right, he does save this woman, so you can see that he has got like a good side to his character. But then as soon as all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we're gonna like hang you now, he's like, okay, this no longer means anything.
It doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, it's like, I've got a higher priority, which is me. And then he starts plotting like how he's gonna get out of there, and it's like this. That was the first action scene that I was talking about, when he sort of threatens her life, but then he tries to escape, and it's this great chase scene that goes on. There's a really good action scene, just like introduced as a proper slingshot into the movie.
Yeah, that you're right. That was like the first action scene, and like they basically take like the setup for this action scene and copy and paste it for every other action scene in this movie. You know, like Jack, he grabs a random rope. I don't know what the rope's fucking doing there, and I don't know what he does. Does he tap it or slap it or cut it? I don't know. He does something to it, and all of a sudden it becomes a magic vine. Physics just were forgotten. It gets flying into the air and starts spinning around, and then just
I think it's like a pulley to get things onto the upper level of the deck. I think so. I think there's like sandbags or something at the top of it, and like he bangs the clip that's like keeping it on, so the sandbags fall down. He shoots up, sort of thing.
He's done it with various devices. He's done it with a curtain at one point. I remember he's done it with like fucking ships decking, and it's like it's a perfect move, and it does get called back several times throughout the series. But I agree with you. Now that I've watched these series, I've watched the trilogy, I'm like acutely aware that I think Jack is actually like a hyper intelligent like vagabond. You know, like he's truly planning in every single scene. It's like it's quite well epitomized by like the scene immediately after, in which well not immediately after, I suppose, because in the movie, as I said, we're introduced to Will, introduced to Elizabeth, and they've got kind of like this love thing going on. Like they look at each other for the first time, and it's obvious that like they're supposed to be the love interest. You know, like,
they're two attractive people in a movie, so they fall
exactly.
in love.
Yeah, exactly. Liz has got like the puppy dog eyes, and Will's like Elizabeth the whole movie. So it's like I quite like the pair of them actually, but you know, we're introduced to them, we're introduced to Jack, and the movie moves on a little bit, and this is where we're introduced to this whole Aztec gold thing, because it has to be Aztec gold. It's a fucking pirate movie, you know. Why wouldn't we? It turns out that the Black Pearl, which is Jack's ship, starts like besieging Port Royal, the port that they're actually on. And Elizabeth ends up getting like captured by Barbossa, and there's this like whole subplot in which it turns out Will actually has a relation to the cursed gold, because his father, you need to use the blood of like his family in order to clear the curse. There's like quite somewhat convoluted stuff going on. So Elizabeth, she's captured by pirates and claims to be Elizabeth Turner, because she thinks to herself, if I have an association with a pirate, they might not kill me. Of course, the pirates that get a hold of Elizabeth, they think that they're the cure to the curse. So they head off. They head over to Isla de Muerta, sorry, and like that's Elizabeth gone for a little while. Will, who's like the love interest of Elizabeth, wakes back up on Port Royal, and he's like, shit, I need to fucking get Elizabeth. That's his goal now. He was happy in the little village before, but now he's like, okay, get Elizabeth. How do I get Elizabeth? I met that weird pirate the other day, didn't I? So let's go see what's happening with him. So he goes over and meets Jack, and Jack's just like cutting about in his cell. He doesn't give a fuck what's happening. He's probably assuming he'll figure out how to escape once he's on the plinth, waiting to fucking get his head chopped off or something like that. But Will like starts convincing him. He's like, oh, she's like a lady of honor, and like, why would I do this? And I can't remember what happens exactly, but Jack looks at him and he's like, who the hell are you anyway? And he's like, Will Turner. In that very moment, you see like the light bulb go off in Jack's head. He comes up with his whole plan about going to Isla de Muerta and like giving up Will in order to get for the Black Pearl. It's like just the things that I was so unaware of when I initially started watching this series. So and that naturally, because it's a pirate movie, leads to, like as you said, several double crosses. Jack eventually, when they get to Isla de Muerta, double crosses Will and says, take him, I don't want him, you just give me the pearl. Barbossa, his first mate, that originally double crosses Jack again and just takes the lot of them. So he has Elizabeth, Will, and Jack. There's this whole like small plot where Jack ends up getting sent back to the first island that he was abandoned on, and you learn a little bit more about the backstory of Jack. Because it turns out he actually used to be the captain of the Pearl, and then he was mutinied against by his first mate Barbossa, and like Barbossa's probably the only character in the series which has this like kind of rivalry with Jack going on a little bit as the series goes on. But he ends up on this island again, and like he comes up, you hear about the legend of Jack Sparrow, you know, how he spent like 9 months on this island, eventually roped together a couple sea turtles in order to fucking get off in the end, and you realize that this is obviously part of like the charade that Jack sells the world. If you hadn't realized by now, he's actually just a fucking mental backstabbing pirate.
Yeah, but you also kind of start to get the impression that over the course of however many years that Barbossa has been the captain in the Black Pearl and Jack, it's like something he's been plotting for the entire time. It's like everything.
Yeah, he's had the pistol, for 10 years.
Yeah, everything that kind of happens throughout the film, you don't really know what Jack's intentions are at any given moment, and as the audience, it kind of keeps you in the dark a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as he meets Will in Port Royal, he realizes that his second name is Turner. He's like, okay, I now have leverage. He now knows that Will wants Elizabeth, so he knows how to like influence him.
Mm-hmm.
Will's like also this naive little boy, so he can like totally control him on the ship, and he basically has
That's asking about his dad and that.
yeah, has like total power over him. They get to the island. He's moving all the pieces, sort of thing.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
He comes across as this like he's playing like 3D chess, but the rest of the characters are playing 2D chess, and he's like on another level of like figuring out how to get what he wants, sort of thing.
Yeah. But it's quite good as well because he doesn't like overshadow anyone, because like at the very beginning, after that first immediate fight scene, Jack like is flees. Like he's had his encounter with Elizabeth, now he has to have the encounter with Will, and he's got these fucking handcuffs on. He's like, I'm not going to be able to get a ship with handcuffs on. How do I get handcuffs off? I'll go to the blacksmith. So he heads into the blacksmith, and that's where Will works. And it turns out Will's this fucking batshit crazy dude that spends like 4 hours every single day training with a sword with no one to fight against. I don't know. But anyway, it turns you see the two of them fight, and you realize that like Will's probably a better sword fighter than Jack. Like if these two were on like an even footing in like a duel, Will would probably win. But that's not how Jack plays. He will find every rule outside of the book to manipulate this fight. He ends up like fucking they're up on the rafters, and fucking he eventually just pulls out his gun and he's like, I'm a pirate, mate.
Yeah.
What did you expect?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's then right, so eventually Jack ends up on this island with Elizabeth, and now it's Elizabeth's time to shine. It's because she's like, well fucking I'm just not going to sit on this island with you for 3 months waiting to get picked up. She burns all the rum, and that's where that infamous line, "Where's the rum gone?" comes, which I fucking hate now. But obviously people liked it at the time. Where's the rum gone? And what do you know? It's actually Norrington that ends up finding them. Like they're in the ship, and of all the ships in the entire ocean, Norrington picks them up. Jack ends up in jail again by Norrington again, and Norrington at this stage he just wants to head back to
Port Royal, yeah.
The Port Royal, yeah, exactly. But Elizabeth, obviously, she like still loves Will, so she like says to James Norrington, "If you help me save Will, the guy I've got puppy dog eyes for, I'll marry you." And Norrington thinks that's completely reasonable, so he goes ahead and does that. And in this movie, actually, I always remember feeling pretty bad for Norrington's character. I don't know if you like. I think in like when I was like watching videos about this movie, people just kept calling him like a stuffy British dick, but I don't know why. Part of me always has a soft spot for him. I don't know if that's just me.
He has like he seems to be like almost the villain at the start of the movie, but then it's like later on, oh, we actually have bigger fish to fry, but he's like still there. I think
He's still kind of doing bad things,
but
as
his
well.
character kind of comes into it a little bit more in the second one, I think, where he has like a more pivotal role in what happens in the story.
Yeah.
I enjoy his character much more in the second one than in the first one, where he's just sort of like he's almost like a plot device in the first one, where it's like, oh, pirate's bad, and then when that goes away, he then manages to save them. Like he's just kind of like something to like drive the plot forward, but you don't really notice it that much, I don't think.
You're right. He's like the face of the British Empire, basically, in that movie. He's like the pirate hunter. Right. That's just like his role, and I think he does quite good at that. But he has this thing going on with Elizabeth, which is kind of strange. But Norrington decides, sure, okay, if I'm going to get in Elizabeth's pants, then I'll do absolutely anything for it. So I'm willing to save Will for that, which is like props to him. He's cute United.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, I'm all about that. Yeah.
Exactly. So they actually head over to Isla de Muerta, and naturally, fucking Jack comes up with a plan. He's like, okay, so the pirates are in there. Why don't I go in, lure them out, and then you guys can kill all the pirates? You'll have the gold. Bob's your uncle. Fucking done's done. I'll be able to get the pearl. And Norton's like, sure, okay, we'll go with that. Like, okay, I'm sure he intends on just killing any of them anyway. He's like, let's go with this madman's plan. They eventually turn up to the island, and Jack saunters in there to the fucking Viper's Nest a second time. After they've abandoned on our island, they just fucking completely casually wanders in there. Barbossa can't fucking believe what he's seeing. And then, of course, Jack just does the classic double cross. He's like, by the way, there's a bunch of British guys out there trying to ambush you. I suggest we go out and ambush them. But of course, in Jack's mind, all he's trying to do is sow chaos. He wants as many people dead so that Pearl is empty, so that he can go get the Pearl.
Yep.
You know, so he's like, that's why he's leading all the pirates out here. Because the key is he's also like, don't undo the curse now. You know, like kill all the British, then we'll undo the curse. Do it. You know, you're still immortal now, so let's get this fucking killing out the way.
Yeah, it's just
So-
another example of Jack like coming in and he's like told the British one thing, he's told the pirates another thing. He's like worked out the whole situation. Like Will's there as well and Elizabeth's there, and he's just kind of like trying to play all the pieces. And like obviously they've got this curse where they can't be killed, and Jack's like using that against the British, but he's also using his leverage with the ship and with Will to get the Pearl off of Barbossa. But
yes,
all the while he's got like a triple cross going on where like they're gonna leave and he's gonna start a fight with Barbossa that will have, and that he's gonna curse himself to start this fight.
yeah, exactly.
So that Will can undo the curse, and he's just like up on another level. He's like out of his own body, looking down, viewing the rest of them like moving around on the board, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I just don't think he gets the props that he deserves. Like as a character, he's just phenomenal, but he does so kind of like in the shadows. He does so from a point of like total secrecy.
I think that's like the best, probably one of the best things about Jack Sparrow, because like you can watch this character and just think, like you watch it and you can think, if you're not paying attention, he's just a buffoon, this is complete blind luck. But it's like as soon as you start paying attention, every situation he walks into, he like sets it up for whatever crazy convoluted plan he's comes up with. And that's what I mean, man. Like I think this for me is Jack's movie. I think in the other movies they do kind of emulate this to some extent, a little bit, and Jack's still Jack in the first three films, very much so. But like this was him at his best, I think, his absolute best. And it just like, I don't know, it's so self-contained, and it's really, really much Jack's story. In the end, he does take out the pirates, he like lifts the curse, perfectly times it. After like double crossing Will ages ago, he now actually during the fight he gives Will like the wink. He's like, we're on the same side again, you realise? And Will's like, oh, okay. So they managed to time it, take out Barbossa, and that's fucking it. The curse has been lifted. You know, they hand back the gold. Of course, actually, I'm forgetting that during like when all this was happening, the pirates from the Intercessor, Jack's ship, they head back to the Pearl, decide, fuck everyone, we're leaving with the Pearl, leaving everyone behind. So they end up backstabbing everyone else. But it's effectively a kind of a happy ending. Jack, though, does get arrested by the British, and basically he's back where he was at the beginning of the film, because he's like once again being executed for piracy. But this time, his man Will comes in dressed as fucking... I was going to say Aldonio Fuentes, but
I'm not sure if you will get that reference, Lewis.
Yeah, no. Antonio Banderas.
Yes, I.
Looking like an absolute badass, and he stops the execution. And for some reason, just because it's a happy ending and it's a standalone film, you know, the English end up letting away with it. Him and Elizabeth they're allowed to marry. Jack gets away. Commodore's like lieutenant or something like that. It's like, should we go after him, Commodore? And he's just like, nah, give him a few days. It's like, it was a perfect happy ending.
It's the end
like,
of the movie, pal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, even he's letting him off with it. You know, I thought it was a really perfect, self-contained little story, and that's what I felt. As I said at the start there, it felt like this was just like a couple weekends in Jack's life. This is the type of shit that he gets up to all the time, constantly losing and gaining ships, and just brilliant.
I think the movie gives you the impression that that's like a pirate's life, though, where it's like the movie is like this like 2-hour self-contained adventure, and it gives you the impression that that is the snapshot of a pirate's life. It's like Jack's only been doing this for like 2 weeks at this stage, like start of the movie to the end of the movie, maybe a couple of weeks long, and it almost expects you to believe that every 2 weeks he repeats something along these lines, sort of thing. So I think I think that's the fantasy about pirates in general, where it's like no responsibility, no, like I said earlier, no taxis, no job, no clocking in, and every 2 weeks you're just doing what you love, and you're having these insane adventures that are going on. You're doing these double crosses, triple crosses, and it is like a really nicely self-contained small adventure. And I think the movie would do well to like not go back into the past and like try to explain to you how they all got there and how this all happened, because it becomes like impossible to emulate over like a long period of time, the first movie, which is why I think the second and third movies go into like a more sort of long form story with actually a big plot going on, because that first movie is kind of impossible to emulate like backwards and forwards. There's no way for you to create stories that are going on every 2 weeks that are like that epic sort of thing.
No, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's just it, isn't it? It's like you're saying it. Like I agree that like in the next couple of films, you start going into a little bit more depth and explaining things, and like I think that just was such a charm of the first film is that they didn't bother explaining things. You know, it's like when Jack first says Elizabeth, he's like he immediately clocks that she's wearing a corset and that's why she can't breathe. And the two of them like, how do you know that? And he's like, you've never been to Singapore, have you? The audience is like, what the fuck? What the fuck's going on in Singapore? You know, they don't even address that. So that's just like part of the world. Like Tortuga, they spend like a scene in that place, but it's like a fucking riot. You know, it's like a whorehouse, gambler's den, fucking pub full of like shady business. It basically seems like Jack's any pirate's version of heaven. Yeah, exactly. But it's like we don't dwell too much on there. We just get shown like there's this awesome location. I think what's so good was that these places weren't given background. I really did believe that we were like in a real setting with this movie. And that's what was so great about the first film is it didn't explain it. But you're right, it was when I rewatched the second and the third one, I actually started maybe appreciating that I did think going into details in the areas that they did was quite effective.
Sure, the first one's kind of the way we spoke about like Darth Vader almost when it came to Star Wars, but it was like as soon as he started explaining the mystery of it behind it, it became this thing that nobody was. Everyone had hyped it up past what it eventually was. There was no way to explain the brilliance of Jack Sparrow, and I think to an extent, the second and the third movies still keep that kind of sacred because they don't really. They go back a little bit into Jack's life and they explain some of the more nuanced points of it, but they don't.
Yeah, they talk about like
they don't give him like an origin story. You know, they still keep sacred things sacred, which is essential. I think there are a couple of bits about it where I was kind of annoyed that they explained certain things, and I'm like, just leave these things unsaid and let the audience think that something epic has happened because whatever it is, you'll never live up to it. But you're right. The second and third films did. It was a bit of a deeper dive, and it still worked just as well.
Yeah, speaking of the second films, like they actually came out a few years later. It was 2003. The first one came out. Second one was 2005, and then the third one was 2006. So it came out right after. So you know, it's not a huge gap between these movies, but it was like a clear example of we've come up with the first movie. The first one was wildly successful, and now we need to make another two movies. Like the mouse is on our back, it's fucking claws out. So we're going to do something about it, and it was. I think it was something. Usually, you tend to find that like movies that are come up as a standalone that then have a trilogy tacked on, the other ones always do have like a different tone going on. It almost seems inevitable. Like, The Matrix is a good example as well, where you have the first movie that's considered gold tier in people's minds, and then the second movies are like considered like people. I think there's a huge amount of fans for them, but probably not quite got the appreciation that the first one has, and it's kind of a shame. It's because like I actually think the second movie is brilliant. I think it by far it outpaces the third film, and it actually comes down to like these same aspects in which I think keep me most interested in the first film, and that's this kind of idea of each character having like thoughts going on in their head. You know, they're all each character in every scene. You get the impression they have a motivation and they want to do something. I think they really, really effectively pulled that forward to the second movie, and the way they did that is by basically making the entire movie a chase to get a key to get a chest. You know, because it's called Dead Man's Chest, and that's exactly everything about this movie is about from the start to finish.
By the time the second one rolls around, because the first one you have these quite naive characters that are kind of in Will and Elizabeth that are introduced to this pirate lifestyle, and as the audience we can see how that may be attractive, but they're just trying to get the hell out of it. But then by Jack's like influence, and by the time the first movie like ends and the second movie begins, it's almost no longer about Jack. You're right. The first movie is kind of about Jack, but then the second one becomes a bit more of a trio. They become sort of a team. But it's clear that Elizabeth and Will are also kind of learning to be pirates because they start making their own deals and they start becoming a bit.
They start doing their own backstabs and that. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. As they get introduced to the lifestyle, they become less and less naive, and they become more. They get more wise as to the antics that are going on and how to manipulate the world around them. They just basically start learning to live in the environment.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is literally like Jack rubbing off them. The thing, first thing I mentioned though, but like, is that the second film, we're talking about how it did quite a good job. It does that. It unfortunately had to do that thing where you've got a film with a perfect ending that was closed and buttoned up, and they had to break it back open again. So obviously, like Will and Elizabeth's marriage, they need to fuck that up somehow. So they have a reason. They need to incite some type of conflict. So this is where they introduce the character Beckett, who represents the East India Trading Company. He's like probably the main antagonist for these two films. And it turns out he has basically put the fucking death penalty on their head for colluding with pirates. And you're like, why the fuck have he done that? It turns out he's done that because he knows that they are friends of Jack. So he asks them, I'll pardon you if you can get me a hold of Jack's compass. So already we've got Jack and Elizabeth, they're looking for the compass, and Beckett is looking for the compass as well. We know that Beckett wants to get the compass to find the chest, but we don't know that thus far. And then immediately in the second scene, Jack's cutting about in the peril, and he's visited by Bootstrap, which is Will's father. Well, this is where they go into a little bit of like the backstory of Jack's character, and I think they did a reasonable job here. That they basically gave away that 13 years ago, Jack made a deal with Davy Jones, and the deal was to rise his old ship from the bottom of the ocean. It turns out he used to be a privateer for England, and his old ship was called the Wicked Wretch or something like that. It was sunk with an explosion. That's where he made a deal with Davy Jones to rise it up to the top and make it the fastest ship on the waters, faster than the Dutchman. Obviously, Jack was thinking about what's going to happen at the end of these 13 years. So you get given this little bit of backstory, which I quite like, and then Jack is basically told, look, your time's up, the Kraken's coming after you, you've got the black spot in your hand. Now Jack is like, okay, I have this shit on my back, I'm going to find out some way to get myself out into this situation.
This is where the movies take a turn that I think a lot of people turn off at this stage, because the first film had the curse. So you find out, the first film's called The Curse of the Black Pearl, and eventually you find out that every crew member on the Black Pearl has this curse where they're all undead, and it's quite a big plot point in the first film, but it's not the vast majority of the movie by any means. It's like an obstacle they have to overcome.
Right, yeah.
But by the time the second movie rolls around, all of a sudden you have this guy, you have Davy Jones, who, that the famous scene, Davy Jones' locker at the bottom of the ocean. Turns out he's real, and not only is he real, but he's like a sort of half man, half fish, sort
Octopoid, yep.
Sort of hybrid, and all of his crew are exactly the same, and they apparently transfer the souls of like dead sailors onto the afterlife from the bottom of the ocean. And it's like, it's sort of like, hold on a second, because Will's dad is a part of Davy Jones's crew, so he's a half fish as well, and he magically transports onto the bottom deck of the Black Pearl to like talk to Jack.
Yeah.
And things take a left turn into like Crazy Town almost, where I can see how people would then be like, this is not, because the movie at that point has gone kind of above and beyond piracy. It's not like about pirates anymore.
No, exactly.
It's kind of about this magical world that they live in, and there's loads of these fictional threads that are going on. You can kind of get on board with, the Black Pearl is cursed in the first movie, but now it's like a total,
it's a magic world now.
It's a hop, skip, and a jump way past these people are cursed. It's like this world is magical that we live in.
Yeah. That is something I've seen with the series. Like with each installment, magic begins to explain more and more and more, and to which like the most recent movies, it's basically they don't explain a fucking thing. They're like magic, just cause, like fucking. We'll briefly mention it later on, but like you've got the Fountain of Youth. For some reason, to use the Fountain of Youth, you need like two people, and one of the hobbits has to have like a mermaid's tear, and like you end up transferring your life between people, and it's like this fucking totally stupid stuff. But you're right. The movies do start to go a little bit left field here, and to perfectly exemplify that, like we just got told that Elizabeth and Will need to get the compass. Jack's just told that the Kraken's after him. What's the next scene? 30 minutes of them chasing around Jack when he's this fucking like chief of a random tribe in the middle of an island, and like he's like the tribe leader because he somehow inexplicably can speak the language, but of course the tribe leader is the one that actually gets eaten. It's like, and like the crew, you're introduced to the crew first time in the movie. What they're in a bunch of like skeletal cages hung above a cliff in the middle of nowhere. It's like, what the fuck is even happening here? Like, where are this was very much not nautical. You know, this was just a.
That's
I don't know how
probably
I feel about
that's
this whole
probably the
scene.
worst scene in the trilogy. I think actually, I think that might be like the last straw for a lot of people in these movies. Where
Yeah,
like
and it's the start. That's the thing.
all of a sudden it's like Davy Jones exists, the Kraken is
Hmm.
a monster in the sea, and it can take down any ship if he tells it to. Then you've got the what is essentially the East India Trading Company, which is essentially the police of the sea sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
The leader of that company is actually trying to get the magical compass, and it's like all of a sudden this movie just took a sharp left turn
What the
into
hell?
crazy town.
Yeah.
On top of all that, people not having a fucking clue what's going on, then they're on this Jack's on this island because he's trying to stay away from the water to get away from the Kraken, and he becomes the leader of this tribe, and that's like all done off screen. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
at that point people just like turn over the channel. They're like, no, nah, done.
Yeah.
I'm done now.
There's probably something to that, and of course, like it doesn't stop there. It's because once they get off the island, they go to meet Tia Dalma, who's like this Wiccan lady that apparently is somewhat magic. She's got like, fucking eyeballs and jars and that type of shit, and she's like telling them because like she basically tells them the story of the chest, you know, and like the Davy Jones and how he has the heart locked away, and the people that want to, if you want to control Davy Jones, you need to get the heart and stuff like that. So like it takes that a step further, and we end up running into her. So you're right. The start of this movie is pretty intense, actually, in terms of like the magical stuff. I don't know if I feel I would go as far to say that it kind of like uses the magic to like force the movie to get moving. I don't know. It's just not as egregious as it could be. But you're right. There's something missing compared to this, compared to the first film. There's like a grounded spark that's missing here for some reason.
The themes kind of changed between the first one and the second one as well. Like you were saying earlier about the Matrix, about how the first one is its own
Hmm.
thing, and then the second and third ones are like a different kind of movie.
Yeah.
It kind of happens to you as well because in the first one you get like sort of like light-hearted pirate adventure where everyone's kind of having fun. Jack's double crossing everyone. There's a
Hmm.
monkey that's
Hmm.
undead as well. It's like, oh, this is all very like
Yeah.
jovial sort
Uh-huh.
of thing. But then you get to the second one and it's very much like Jack has the omen of death. It's like it's darker, it's a bit more serious. It's like it's still got elements of humour in it, but it's definitely like more gritty. It starts to take itself a bit more serious,
Hmm.
which I'm not sure acts in the movie's favour.
Well, the problem I have is a bit like of a dissonance because, like, to me, it feels like each movie gets progressively darker, and I think that's something to do with the idea that piracy is dying. See, from the start of these movies till the end, like the East India Trading Company and the British Empire, they rule the seas by the end. You know, like pirates are a dying breed. So there's like this kind of this nuance and this kind of dark tone behind it, which I love. I think that's amazing. But the second one, the problem I had was that well, to actually rehearse, like obviously after they made the first movie, it was a financial success, and like certain people liked certain things. People like the backstabbing, you know. People like the goofy slapstick humor, like Jack walking around on fucking poles and stuff like that. People like, for instance, you know, where's the rum gone? He says that like twice in the second movie, and it's just like it's a dead joke before we've even started, you
Yeah.
know. These are the things where they go totally over the top, and the problem I have with the second movie is that I think so many of the action scenes are just like dumbed down in a way somehow. I think there's so much more. That's like slapstick humor, you know, of like stupid jokes of Jack being like, you know, like looking at the camera, being like, what have I got myself into again?" type of thing. I hate that about the second film. Actually, it's one of the things I really don't like. But I noticed a big difference. Like it was literally as if they had like the people that screened the first film. They wrote down the things they liked, the moments that made them laugh, and like they went to the script writers and like, more of this, please. You know, which is good and bad, I suppose.
Mhm. Yeah, there definitely is a lot more of like Jack getting himself into trouble, and like I think in the scenes where he is in trouble, he comes across as a much more stupider character.
Less in control.
Yeah, in the
I
second
think.
movie, like very much so. And I get that like there's bigger forces at play now. Maybe it's a bit harder for him to manipulate everyone, but he
Mhm.
comes across as just like dumb in some of those scenes.
Yeah.
There's a couple of scenes in the second one where he just like straight up doesn't know what's going on, and it's
Yeah.
like he
This is not Jack, right? Mhm.
is like he thinks something's happening when something totally opposite's happening, which I guess is maybe because there are more forces at play. Like they're like Will and
I guess
Elizabeth
so.
are also interfering. They're doing their own thing. There's more pieces on the board. I guess
Yeah,
you
yeah,
you know
exactly. Yeah, there's bigger powers at play. You know, exactly as you said, and more of them. So
yeah.
you're right. There's definitely something to that, and I don't know. It's something that's not. It's, you know, it's a critique I have of this film. But at the end of the day, it's a middle film, and you always expect there to be a bit of a lull. And this film's quite unique in a way because there's not really the traditional lull. It's not like a story started, this is intermediate. This is almost like a second first film, you know. But yeah, that's kind of like by an aside thing. If we were to get back to like the story, we've just like introduced Will, we've introduced Tia Dalma, got Jack and stuff like that. The next thing is we actually meet Davy Jones for the first time, and this is because a random merchant ship actually gets attacked by the Dutchman, and Davy Jones actually meets Jack. He's like, Jack, what the fuck's happening? You need to give me 100 souls or your soul right now. And Jack, of course, he's like, see that boy over there on your ship? Will, I think he's called. You can have him, type of thing. So Will ends up getting fucking inadvertently signed up to the Dutchman, and Jack needs to get 100 souls, so that's his next objective. Jack heads over to Tortuga because he's like, where can I find 100 wasted souls? Definitely Tortuga. And Jack, he spends some time on the Dutchman. We learn a little bit more like the dynamics of that ship, what's going on, and eventually Will finds his main motivation for the rest of the series, and that is his dad. It's because he realizes that his dad is trapped on this ship and basically indefinite service, and he realizes that if I'm able to get the key to get the chest, I will be able to save my father. So he has this great game of liar's dice, which I ended up looking up how this game works. Actually, it's because the movie does a terrible job of teaching the rules. It's actually an extended cut. There's like an extended cut which is like 10 minutes long, which really shows you each move that each person's playing, and it like makes you understand like why they're raising the bets in the way they are. Like it's a very tactical game that's going on. The fact that they've started with 3 of them, basically like, because Will's dad joined the game last, he could have always ended up sacrificing himself to make sure that Will wins. But of course you find out in the end that Will's like, Dad, I just want to see where the fucking key was, you know. I don't give a shit about this game. So Will gets the key, and now we've kind of got this motivation. We're kind of like where we are on the board. Everyone right now wants the chest. Jax wants the chest because he wants to save himself and call off the Kraken. Will wants the chest because he wants to save his dad. That's another character, actually. David Jones wants the chest because his fucking heart's in it. Becca wants the chest because it's going to control the oceans. And
Norrington.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say one character that I forgot. Once we go back to Tortuga, Elizabeth actually meets back up with them. She's like, oh, by the way, if I can get a chest as well, I've got a couple pardons here. As it just so happens, Norrington overhears this and he's like, pardons? Interesting. So that's him. He wants to get the chest so that he can get his life back, because he's actually become like this fucking dropout. He's like sleeping with the pigs. He's had it rough, man. Like I felt obviously like they thought it would be quite funny at the end of the film. Like, I give Jack a couple days, but it turns out like in the lore he spent like several years chasing Jack across the ocean, like killing thousands of his men, type of thing, and eventually he just became this absolutely washed up soldier, which is, it's fucking sad, man.
Well, he goes through like a tornado, doesn't he? In the lore, like the Pearl goes round the tornado and Norrington tries to go through it and he ends up destroying his ship, and he just becomes...
Becca's like, you can't go through it, man, did you? He's like, 200 souls lost. It's like, fucking hell. Yeah, he's like, Jack's like ruined this guy's life off screen. You know, you don't even see it. That is another really good example of where you get the impression that like things are always going on in the background here. There was no, you know, just because we've spent like a year off screen doesn't mean that Jack wasn't out there having adventures, running away from James Norrington with the Pearl and stuff like that. So that's quite good as well. But that's us now. We've got our 5 characters that all want the chest, and basically the end of this movie, well, from here till the end of this movie, is just those characters each positioning and strategizing and trying to double cross each other in order to try and get the chest, you know.
The movie's kind of like, it's one big MacGuffin, like the entire film, to like get the chest, but it does this like unique concept with it where it gives you an item that like helps you find MacGuffins,
right?
and like, because Jack's compass points you to whatever you want the most, so it's like it can point you to any MacGuffin the movie provides.
Yeah,
and it sort of becomes the MacGuffin because of it, and like Jack's trying to use that because Elizabeth wants to find Will, and Jack's like, yes, but to find Will you have to find David Jones's chest.
Exactly.
So he gives her the compass, and then now she can find the chest, and it's like another level of like trickery that goes on.
Yeah, obviously his compass is like relatively sentient because it doesn't know what she wants, it knows what she needs to get what she wants, you know.
Well, and I think the idea is that Jack convinces her that she needs this thing in order to get Will. So this
Mm.
is actually what she wants right now because it's the first thing she has to do to get the thing she wants, sort of thing.
That, that makes sense. I didn't understand actually why Jack couldn't use it himself. Is he like conflicted at this stage, or does he not know what he wants, or like I actually don't. I was thinking about this when I was writing these notes. I was like, I don't know why Jack had to ask Elizabeth to do that.
Well, does Jack's using the compass at one point, and it's just like spinning around in circles, like
Yeah,
it's not
I
giving
remember
him.
that.
I
Uh-huh.
think
Is that because he's directionless or doesn't know?
it's because he wants the key to the chest.
Uh-huh.
He knows there's a chest, but he knows he can't open it without the key, and the key is on the Dutchman, which is elsewhere. It's like doesn't really exist. I
Oh,
think, and
really?
like because it goes below the water, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it goes to like another plane of existence sort of thing. So the compass just like spins because it's not locatable. I think that was my understanding of it anyway.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Fuck it, man. See, this is the stage though in the movies where like I stop looking for reasons for everything. It's because we're kind of getting into that territory where there's like MacGuffins for MacGuffins, and it's like, okay, we're just going to let them do what they're doing. They're leading us to a certain location here, and I'm sure we're going to like it when we're there. This is a pretty good example of that. So you're right. I don't know what the fuck all that was about about the compass and stuff like that. But Elizabeth does get the compass and she leads them to an island. And this is where like the three main forces thus far converge because we have Jack, Will, and Norrington on the beach, and they dig up the chest, and they have this. This ends up becoming this. I'm in my mind, epic, ridiculously chaotic, over the top battle where you've got like these three guys with their three diverging, like they have like conflicts with each other, and that ends up manifesting as them literally fighting. And like they're first off they're fighting over the chest, and you've got this crazy synchronated fight where they're like going up stairwells and clanging bells off each other and stuff like that. And naturally, eventually, David Jones does get involved and leads to this really. Am I right in thinking? So basically, to paraphrase, you've got this crazy fight going on. You've got like hamster wheels clanging across the island the whole time. Elizabeth's just sitting there, literally sitting on her arse because she has nothing else to do in this scene.
I think so.
Because obviously they forgot about Elizabeth. This movie, this was very much one for the boys. It feels anyway. Norrington somehow, no, Jack somehow gets a hold of the heart. I don't even know how he gets a hold of it, but he goes back to the dinghy and puts it in a jar. Norrington notices that he's put it in a jar, so then goes out, takes it from the jar, stuffs it in his pocket. Norrington fucks off to Beckett. Jack then has the jar, thinks the heart's in it, and then they spend like some more time moseying around on the island. Eventually, they end up escaping, and Jones is like, "Set the cracking on them. Fuck it, I'm taking them out right now." One other weird thing about this movie before we get to like the final scene, which I don't know, I think yeah, we've talked about this in the past actually, was what they do with Elizabeth, right?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
it is very strange.
It is weird, and like that's what I just mentioned there. Like in this scene, it felt like Elizabeth didn't have anything to do. I kind of felt in this movie, Elizabeth didn't have much to do because all of her main like motivations, when she has them, just to line up with Will's, I think, and then
Well, so
eventually
in this
does the whole
movie,
dad thing.
she becomes the Will of this movie in the sense that her only motivation is to find Will. Whereas his motivation in the first one
Sure.
was to find Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
Her motivation is to find him. But because she's with Jack the entire time, they do this weird thing where like Jack's like constantly trying to seduce her, and they don't. I don't think they necessarily make out that she loves Jack, but they definitely make out like there's like a love triangle
Something
going
though,
on here.
yeah, yeah.
But then as soon as Will like returns, it seems like to her that was like never an issue. So it's like this half committed love triangle where it's like she's never gonna go out with Jack or do anything with Jack, but the movie kind of wants you to think that she
Yeah,
will, and it's like it kind of half commits to it, and it ends up being this really strange plot twist.
yeah, it's just so awkward, and like it felt like to me that if like Will and Elizabeth just spoke to each other and had a conversation about how they're feeling, this wouldn't have happened. But I kind of felt that in most of the scenes that they're in, they're kind of acting a little bit awkward to each other. At least Elizabeth was. I always kind of got the impression that she was like in herself. She was dithering. Is it like, oh, is it Jack or is it Will type of thing, which was just so weird, especially after the first movie. Like Jack's already tried it on with her, and they were like the pair of them were pissed, trapped on an island in the middle of nowhere. If it was ever going to happen, it would have happened in the first film, you know. But so now they like start this whole conflict. To me, it just kind of feels like they were trying to give Elizabeth something something to do in this movie, and I don't think they do a really good job at that actually.
Maybe, but Will's motivations have kind of changed at this point as well. By the time they're like reunited, like all he cares about is getting his dad off the Dutchman now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So like, they kind of come back, and he's kind of like, "Hiya, like I'm busy right now,"
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Even though it's been
Yeah.
like months or whatever since they've seen each other. But
That's
then
a good point.
and then she's like sort of into Jack, and that's when Will's like, "Hold on a second, like maybe
What's going on here?
yeah, exactly."
Yeah, because of course that leads us on to like the final scene in the movie. Once Beckett fucks off with the heart, the lot of them, they head back to the I think, is it the Pearl? Yeah, they head back to the Pearl, and Jones unleashes the Kraken, and this is where they realise like they have this pretty epic battle where they fight off the Kraken for like 10 minutes. In a previous scene, we've seen that the Kraken can take out a ship in approximately 5 seconds, but they hold the Kraken off for X amount of time by like blowing it up with gunpowder and stuff like that, which is cool, I suppose. Eventually they decide they're like, we're gonna have to abandon ship, and Elizabeth does this weird thing where she's like Holt stays back in the ship with Jack, and she like pretends to like go kiss him, and she does kiss him, but obviously when she's doing that, she's actually like handcuffing him to the ship to try and keep him there, and her motive is basically that the Kraken's after you, it's not after us, so I'm gonna sacrifice you to save us, type of thing.
I think there's quite a change in her character at this moment as well, where you start to realise, oh, now you're a pirate as well. Because,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
You double cross someone to get what you want, sort of thing.
Yeah,
you're no longer doing the noble goody two shoes act. You're now killing someone to save yourself, sort of thing.
exactly. Yeah, and like because there has been this change throughout the movie, because like even from the beginning they realise they're gonna have to turn in Jack in order to get the good books from Becca, type of thing. So like it has been leading up to this, and eventually she kills him. Of course, though, this happens to be the moment that like Will pops his head up over the ship. He's like, "You guys coming?" and sees the pair of them kissing, and naturally, instead of confronting her about it again, he just acts sulky and weird, and it's like, what's going on between them? So it's kind of a weird place to end it, I suppose. Jack does free himself, and he like valiantly jumps into the Kraken's mouth. I can remember when I was like a kid watching this movie, being like, "Is Jack dead?" Like this is the second movie, and he just jumped into the Kraken. I can only assume Jack's dead, but the very, very final scene is actually them back in Tia Dalma's hut, and like it's obviously really strained between I was going to say Liz, between Elizabeth and Will, and I always forget his name,
Gibbs. Jack
Gibbs.
and Jack,
Yeah,
Jack's crew,
yeah.
basically, yeah.
Yeah. Aye, like Jack's crew, they're all like kind of like under the weather and that type of thing. Tia Dalma's like, you're gonna have to get him back. They're like, where do we get him back? She's like, at World's End. Like, the next movie. And then that's of course where Barbossa walks down the stairs, and that was like a fucking really hype moment for me, to be honest.
This is like the moment where they actually just say fuck all
Yes.
logic. Like, magic is now explaining everything now, because it's just obviously they're just looking for an excuse to bring Barbossa back, and this woman can just all of a sudden has the power to bring people back from the dead. Like, it's a very, I always thought it was a really strange part. It's really not. It's never explained. And I know we're saying like we don't like things to be too explained, but we don't like nothing to be ever said, sort of thing.
Sure, yeah. This was like the point in the series where they're literally like looked at the camera and they're like, "Oh yeah, we can actually bring back any character we've killed off in the future." By the way, not the ones that we don't care about, but if they're a main character, don't worry about them. It's because like Barbossa, they don't even explain it. He just fucking walks down the stairs. Which is, as I said, it worked. It's because I was hype as anything to see Barbossa back. It's because Barbossa is just such a, I don't know. He's like pure distilled pirate. He's like the proper R pirate. He's not like Jack, who's like a bit of a. I don't even know how I can keep describing Jack with different words, but he's like, he's Jack. Barbossa is kind of like the more grounding element. And in the next
he's
movie,
like pure evil, right? He's like he's properly
pure
evil
pirate. Man, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like he will like. He's like Jack without the good qualities. He wouldn't save Elizabeth if she fell in the water. He'd leave her, but he'd also be willing to kill her if it meant saving his own life, type of thing. I guess that's kind of quite why I like him. He's quite a good character. I think he makes a wee bit of sense. And in the next movie, we finally get to see like him and Jack properly interacting, and they have a couple of scenes where like they're trying to outdo each other. They've got like whose telescope is bigger and that type of thing. Spoilers, Jack comes back, by the way.
Yeah, but he's not dead though, so she can't just bring him back. There's another MacGuffin to chase first,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the third movie, man. It's quite conflicting, isn't it? It's because the world just grows to like like another degree in size, doesn't it? Because this is where we start introducing like the Pirate Council, the United Nation of Pirates, as if that was a thing, and like it's totally is taken up in their fucking queue, because it turns out like we start the next film, we're not bringing Jack back because everyone likes Jack. We're actually bringing Jack back because he's a pirate lord. You might not have realised, and we might not have mentioned it to you before, but he's one of the 9 pirate lords. Yeah, so is Barbossa. It's like, what the fuck, man?
I quite like it, to be honest. I like the idea that it's like it's a chaotically like woven web. And we learn in this movie as well, because they're constantly talking in the first 2 movies about the pirate code, but something known as the pirate code. It's like there's never spoken about, it's never explained, but it's like something that exists.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about pirates, I know pirates are kind of depicted as these like really unlawful sort of criminals that break the law, they plunder, they do things.
Mm-hmm.
But to relate this back to something that we know about in like D&D, when you're creating a character in D&D, your characters are either known as lawful or chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
their alignment.
I think you would think that a character that was a pirate would be chaotic evil. Now, I would agree that
chaotic.
Well, that's the thing. I would agree that a pirate is evil, but I actually think that pirates are lawful. They just don't adhere to the laws of governments. But the idea that you have this pirate code, and like anytime anyone in the movie says the word parlay, it's like, take her to the captain. It's like, we can no longer. It's like, that's a very lawful thing to have, like a set code. It might not be the code that everyone agrees to. I don't necessarily think that lawful means you stick to the law, but they have their rules, and they're rigid and unmoving, and they adhere to them at all times.
I guess so. Like, I had never, in the previous movies, I knew they had their rules and that type of thing. I like the idea of parlay, and like no man gets, if you're left behind, everyone leaves behind, that type of thing. Like, I thought they were cool, but like the third movie, these are very much laws. There's literally a book of laws, and you can be punished if you don't obey this law. Like the way Barbossa looks at it, I thought I quite liked. It's kind of like like street honor, honor among thieves type of thing. It's like just what you fucking almost unwritten rules. I thought that was cool. The fact that they literally wrote them down was a bit weird. Like I like. It's one of those things. It's really similar to John Wick. I think it's fucking epic when criminals end up having like an underground that's hidden from society that no one knows about. There's just something really, 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 really cool about that. The idea that this could have been happening, you might not have even known about it. It's the idea of like pirate lords coming from all over the world to kind of unite their powers and have like a democratic say, and like literally have political systems in place and rules. It's kind of cool. At the same time, in my head, it just severely clashes with what I defined as a pirate before this movie. And I think some people might have maybe not have a problem with that, but it might have set some people off being like, these pirates are following a lot of rules right now,
Well, I think you're right when you say Barbossa is kind of like, because he mentions quite a few times that he sees them as kind of like guidelines.
Yeah,
it gives you the impression that he will break the rules. Like if no one's around, like he'll just do whatever the fuck he wants, sort of thing.
Yeah,
when he's at the meetings, he's like, yeah, we'll agree to the code. But then as soon as he's on his own ship with his own crew, he's like, yeah, they're just guidelines. And if we break, those rules, I don't give a shit. Like if I command it, it'll happen, sort of thing.
Well, yeah, you're right. I guess like as a society, it might be lawful, but each person within that society might interpret, be less or more chaotic in their own right. Yeah. I never thought about that before. Actually, I wonder. So you think Jack is more lawful than Barbossa? He has a personal code, I suppose, that he sticks to. I think quite rigidly.
I guess so, but he's sort of willing to manipulate all the situations around him
He's willing to bend every rule he has, though.
Yeah, he's like, in terms of, he still calls himself a pirate sort of thing, but I wouldn't say he quite, like Jack and Barbossa don't really fit into the way they set up pirates in this universe sort of thing. Like they still come together to the meetings, they meet up with the pirate lords, and they adhere to the code when they're there. They do kind of, but I think that's maybe the definition of like lawful evil, where it's like, yeah, we see the law, like we adhere to it, but like every so often we're going to break it, sort of thing,
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess I'd say they're just a bit more neutral in that regard. I suppose these characters, which is probably something that you have to have for a main character to make them interesting. So that's basically what we're setting up for this film. We've got a pirate council, and we know that these guys need to bound up together in order to take out the East India Trading Company. That's the whole point. Like these guys have like totally started like taking over the seas. All the like they've been hanging pirates, even pirate kids, for like over and over and over again. And they sing the song, which basically means the pirate council needs to be summoned. I don't know how the fuck that works. I thought when I watched this the first time, the song's like magical in some way. I don't think it is. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Basically, that's what we're going to be doing in this film. But to get back to like the kind of more fucking crazy, acid trippy kind of aspects of these films, next we find Jack in the locker, and this is just like weird. This scene, man, I almost it felt like it was coming straight out of like Johnny Depp's dream or something, because it's when you have like all the Jacks over around the ship, and like they're fighting over peanuts, and one of the Jacks is like pretending to be a chicken, and like eventually there's like millions upon millions of crabs, or like fucking pebbles, and it's turning into crabs, and it's like, what the fuck is happening here, man? I remember liking it, but
I'm not sure what part of that scene like is meant to be depicting him as crazy and what actually happens, because the peril is obviously stranded on land, but then the sort of pebble crabs move it into the ocean, and the rest of them that go to the locker, they see the pebble crabs do that, so they're obviously real.
Yeah, it's like it's material, but it's obviously as well spiritual. This is not the material plane.
Yeah, I get the opinion that like when you see all the Jacks together on the ship, that's just Jack going about. That's him going. That's him going mental. But then all of a sudden, all these pebbles are like all around. I don't really understand what that point that was.
It turns out the pebbles. Well, you probably know, but like the pebbles were directly sent by Tia Dama, because the goddess Calypso, she sent them into Joan's locker to save Jack. So that's why he ends up rescuing himself, because it's actually Tia Dama that does all this in the first place. I guess. I don't know. I guess like the curse of the locker would have been that you're literally trapped in a desert on the boat. That would have been just like some personal hell of Jack's or something like that. But you're right. There's like questions as to whether this place is spiritual or real or not. It's because obviously like the guys, the crew of the Pearl, Jack's whole crew, they need to get there. They need a map to get there as well. It's not just like it's some ritual or something like that. So there, it's, as I said, in the last movie was where I stopped questioning certain things. This movie, I probably stopped questioning a fair amount of things.
Yeah, I guess to enjoy these movies, you kind of have to accept the idea that there's something like magical going on, and that there is like a place in the world where the veil between the locker and the real world is like sort of slipping a little bit, and you can kind of you can somehow travel that. Like the movie kind of like asks you to accept that and like not ask a lot of questions about it, because there's no physically explaining those things. Whenever you get into a magical universe, you can't literally explain the things that are happening, but you can sort of ground it as much as possible. So by giving them a map to get there and saying, oh, you have to do this to get there, and it's sort of magical, that sort of grounds it for me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm willing to accept like what goes on now.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't too much of a stretch of imagination, but like if you're like literally looking back at the movie, you can poke holes through it. I think that's absolutely fine. So they use like what's she called? Swing. The guy in Singapore. There's a guy in Singapore who they basically help. Sao Fang. Sao Fang's one of the pirate lords, and they end up getting his help to go into the locker. They escape with Jack. They get themselves out of the locker by doing this trippy scene. They have to flip the boat upside down, and there's like type of day, and it was actually quite clever. I thought I quite liked the whole scene.
Yeah, I didn't mind that.
Yeah, and then this movie really goes overboard with the betrayals, and I actually think it goes so overboard that it stops making sense at all. I can't follow what's happening. I know that what happens next is like Will has like said to Sao Fang aside, like, I don't care about Jack. I'm here for the Pearl, because for some reason he says he needs the Pearl to save his father. I don't even know where that motivation's coming from. So Sao Fang decides, okay, it's time to turn on these guys. We're going to take the Pearl. You guys can fuck off. Will turns out he's on their side, but Sao Fang's like betrays Will. So Will gets stuck with the crew. He is like in the brigs with the rest of the crew. Somehow, I don't understand how, even watching the movie a second time, but Sao Fang figures out or thinks that Elizabeth is the goddess incarnate Calypso.
Yes.
I don't know why that happens, but he ends up dying. He's attacked by the Dutchman, and naturally he just makes her the pirate lord. So now we've got Elizabeth, who's a pirate lord of Singapore now. That was in the movie. If you were to watch it back now, there's probably like 4 double crosses that happen just from going from that step of like the Singapore people betraying them to Liz becoming the captain. I don't understand what happened.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter.
it's
at this
like her,
stage.
Southing, Will, and Barbosa, and all of them double cross someone,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
somehow someone ends up on top. You're right. By the time the third movie's coming around, like every scene is sort of like 4 or 5 double crosses that are going on. It's like they have
yeah.
gone back to the script writers again. You've gone, see this more,
Yeah,
more.
yeah. Oh, and it even gets worse. It's because like then Will he starts double crossing people. It's because obviously like the crew realize that Will's tried to double cross them, but they don't seem to do anything about that. He just like stays with the crew with them. I don't. What does he stay with the crew with them? Actually, no. I think they might tell him to fuck off because next thing
He
you
goes and
know,
finds Beckett. Yeah,
Will has found Beckett and he's got Davy Jones and Beckett in a little room and he's like negotiating with them. He tells them what the pirates are planning. He's like, they're going to get Calypso. And like, obviously, Davy Jones loses his fucking mind because we find out there's actually like this tragic love story with Davy Jones and Calypso. It turns out they used to love each other. He inherited the curse where he has to like fear the souls of these dead and he can only touch land every 10 years. And when it came 10 years to meet Calypso, Calypso wasn't there. So he cursed her, trapped her in a human form, and he stopped maintaining his duties, and that's how he got like the octopus and stuff like that. So I actually really like the story of them, but it's almost by the by at this stage. You know, I don't know how much it actually affects the main plot. But Will's basically like, okay, I've told you this. If I show you, if I show you the way to Pirate Cove, you need to promise that you'll protect Elizabeth. And I don't even know what he asked Davy Jones for. He's like, give me the heart or something like that. He negotiates something else. So he basically, Will now betrays everyone. So then, East India Trading Company, along with Will, head to Pirate Cove. Will turns up to Pirate Cove. Elizabeth turns up to Pirate Cove there now. Now she's a pirate lord, and Will like drops the news. He's like, "Oh, by the way, I've brought the navy with me. Like they're here to do, they're here to." He ends up double crossing them again, and this is where we have this weird, like I mentioned there's like rules earlier. Now we've got pirate politics. We've got literally these different lords, and like they bring out the rule book. It turns out like the chronicler, the pirate rule keeper, is Captain Jack's dad. Because why the fuck not at this stage? And his dog is from the previous 2 movies. It's like, whatever, man.
yeah.
I'm more than happy to keep watching.
I kind of drew the straw there where I was like, that dog, like, no, no, that is dumb. That you didn't have to do that, but get watching anyway.
Mm. That's the thing. Actually, you mentioned last week we talked about the dog, and I was like, oh fuck, I forgot about that. I also forgot to see at the end of the second movie, like in the after credit scene, the dog is actually made the tribe leader of that tribe at the start of the second movie. He has like the eyes on and stuff like that, and they're like worshipping him, which surely to my mind means that they're going to eat him. But it turns out he's Teague's dog, and Teague's in this film. So basically they say we need to go to war, otherwise all the pirates are going to get wiped off the face of the earth here. And turns out Teague comes out and he checks the rules. He's like, okay, only the king can commit the entire pirate forces to war, because apparently the kings of pirates have this much power. And they go through this whole process of Barbosa explains to the camera how like every single year, whenever they try and vote for a king, every pirate just votes for themselves, as pirates are probably likely to do. So there's never been a king. But Jack obviously takes this opportunity to like, I don't even this isn't even like a plan of Jack's. I think that he just realizes that there needs to be a shift in the stalemate here. So he ends up voting for Elizabeth after Elizabeth votes for herself.
Well, I think he just votes for someone that
king.
wants to do something that he wants to do. So him and Elizabeth are like on the same page. So he's just like, yeah, you, and that way I'll get what I want.
It just aligned with his interest, didn't it? Yeah, because like the idea was that the whole forces would go to war, and yeah, I don't even know what Jack's motivation at this stage is. He still wants to, as far as I'm aware, Jack still wants. He doesn't need to worry about the Kraken because the Kraken's off his back, but he's like having this idea of living forever and being like the eternal pirate lord. I think that's what he wants out of the chest right now, because he wants to take over the ship just because he thinks that would be great, being an immortal.
Yeah, just living as a captain forever. He's like toying with this idea that he's just gonna like sail the seas for eternity, and that's gonna be like his legacy and it's going to be amazing, or being able to go and land and do things and live a life sort of thing.
Yeah. That was like tossing around his head. So like that's kind of where Jack's sitting right now. So he suggests that like Elizabeth does become the king, and Elizabeth goes ahead and commits to a state of war. And while this is happening, they also agree, let's unleash Calypso. Turns out Calypso is Tia Dama, and Tia Dama turns up, turns into a bunch of shoal of crabs, and makes a maelstrom. That's literally all she does. But thank God she did it. It's because it ended up leading to, I think, the most epic ship battle there's ever been in any film ever. Right?
Yes,
The battle.
the action scene is epic, and it also gives Cutler Beckett one of the most epic death scenes as well, where he's like,
Yeah.
they have like the maelstrom with the Pearl and the Dutchman, which is the sort of in pirate fighting sort of thing where Davy Jones is fighting against the Pearl because he's with Beckett at this stage, and the pirates are trying to fight back. They do that little fight. Will ends up dying, but they end up stabbing the heart at the same time. So he becomes the new Davy Jones. He's the captain of the Dutchman, and then kind of the sea comes to rest, and then the two ships kind of flank Beckett's ship, and then they start firing from the sides, and Beckett's like slow motion walking down the stairs as the ship's like blowing up around him. It's one of the most epic scenes that I've ever seen.
That was one of the scenes that like I didn't even need to like watch it a little bit older to appreciate. Like even as a kid, I was like enthralled by that scene where he's just like walking down the stairway and the music's playing, everything's just fucking blowing up around him. It was so epic. But that's the end of it, man. Everything about this scene goes on for like 15 minutes, this one fight scene, and everything about it is fucking brilliant. Jack finally gets his one-on-one with Davy Jones, and they have this proper brawl where they're like flying around the ship. Jack's doing his signature move, flying from this ship to the other, and Jones is just like fucking teleporting out of things to catch up with him.
He does the thing as well where he grabs a rope and it pulls him along. Yeah,
exactly. Like proper pulling out the signature moves. I can't remember what else happens. Of course, fucking Will and Elizabeth marry. Barbossa marries him because he's the captain of the ship, and that was so cool as well. It was kind of weird. It's because like they don't end up like all the stuff we've talked about with Will and Elizabeth. They don't end up resolving. They just like in the next scene they're like, we'll resolve this with marriage. Yes, that'll do it. Maybe we'll have a kid. That'll solve these problems out, type of thing. And they end up having a kid. So that was weird, but like I just loved it anyway. I didn't even fucking care at this stage. Like I was like, just let them get married. It's the end of the movie, right?
Yeah, but by the time at the end of the third movie, you've kind of had to accept that this trilogy is like no longer the first film anymore, and the first film was almost like dipping its toe into the water of this magical fantasy like universe where it was like, yes, there's a curse, and we don't have to explain that curse for this to be an epic double cross pirate movie. It's just sort of assumed that there's a higher power at work. But then by the time the second and third movies come around, it's like the higher power at work is the plot line now, where you're right when you say the second and third ones, they're almost like a different. It's like the second one is the next first movie sort of thing.
Yeah, it really does feel like that.
And they take it to like a whole nother level. And I'm not sure if they were like planning that at the beginning of the first one, or if that was something that they wrote after the first movie, because that doesn't seem clear to me. But I do know that a lot of people just don't like the second and third movies. But I think you and I appreciate the depth that it goes into, and we're quite willing to accept the magic of the universe, like as long as it's somehow grounded in a way that we can like understand it.
Yeah, I think for the thing about these movies is that we appreciate what they do well, and what they do well is establish depth to a setting which already was like superficially deep. Like we knew that there was stuff going on, but now they're actually going into some of the nitty gritty stuff. Like it's just like so much stuff to epic proportions. Fucking, I love someone Neely who played
Bill Nye.
Bill Niley. There we go. Yeah, like everything about him as playing Jones was just amazing. I love the love thing they have going on. Like there's flaws with the second films, but I'm not even interested in talking about the flaws because I enjoy the rest of it far too much to genuinely worry about that. And it's like you're right. There's nothing. It's not the first film. But I'm glad that it's not the first film in a way. I wouldn't want 3 of the first film. Like the first film is something on its own. This is Jack's story, and then we have the big two-part epic going on afterwards, which just like raises the stakes to really the nth degree and blows up the world, blows up the characters, adds so much intrigue. They're different, man, but I just absolutely love it.
Well, it's quite easy for us to like draw a parallel to these films though, because we spoke about D&D in a previous episode and why we enjoy that, and
Mhm.
D&D sort of follows the arc where you start off at like level 1 where you can't really do much, and by the time you get to level 20 your characters are these magical fucking powerhouses.
Sure.
And the first movie is almost like an adventure where you have like these really low level characters that are just kind of going around, they're double crossing, there's enemies, there's like an undead curse that's going on. But then as the movies kind of ramp up and everyone gets more competent, magic starts to really blow up.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Magic items, everyone has them all of a
yeah,
sudden.
exactly. It's like totally over proportioned in terms of its like the magical capabilities. And I don't think the average viewer just like watches the first movie and it's like an action movie, and they're willing to accept that there's a curse there that is from Aztec gold somehow.
Sure.
But by the time it gets to the second and third movies, that the plot line of like magic has run away with itself so much that it just doesn't make any sense to them anymore. So you can see how someone would like the first movie based on that instinct, where the second and third ones just kind of don't make sense anymore. Whereas those are universes that we enjoy though. We like that level of fiction and fantasy in our movies.
Yeah, exactly. I think they do it quite well, and I think it. As I said, we fucking spent quite a while just talking about the first three movies. I didn't intend on going into much detail about the other ones, but to like briefly talk about On Stranger Tides. It's we always said we've got the first one, then we've got the next two. They like, seem like very much a chunk. Every movie after this feels like it's like just getting further and further removed from what initially made this series. What made the series brilliant to me. Like Jack's no longer Jack. He seems like a dimwit. Actually, he loses all of his brilliant
He's a
plans.
total
He's like,
caricature.
oh, total caricature. He's like the plot is moving him. He's no longer moving the plot. He's getting like shown up by the characters around him. They just start taking like all of a sudden there's like fucking mermaids and there's like fucking sirens and there's like the Fountain of Youth. See the second film in On Stranger Tides. See the first half of the film. Jack doesn't even want to be there. Like folk keep telling him like, oh, I heard you're looking for the Fountain of Youth, and he's like, I don't know why people keep saying that. Like he doesn't want to be there. It's like there's something so fucked up about his character in that film. I think you have seen On Stranger Tides, right?
Yes, it's complete dog shit.
Complete dog shit.
It is everything bad about the first trilogy and none of the good parts. Where it's just like, yes, we're chasing MacGuffins the whole time. Nothing's ever explained. Like they get to the Fountain of Youth and it's like this extremely convoluted system to like it's not just a fountain you drink from. No.
Oh, no.
There's like a convoluted system of how you have to do this, and somebody else transfers their life, and it's a complete pile of garbage. To be honest with you, it's really, really bad. I haven't even seen the fifth one.
Well, actually, from what I understand, like the fifth one, I've not seen the fifth one either because like after the fourth one, I'm like, never again. I'm not fucking putting myself that again. The fifth one actually is like the first. It is
Salazar's Revenge.
God. Yeah, it's Salazar's Revenge, but it is to the fourth what the fourth is to the first. Like there's such a huge difference in the tone of these movies. Like for one thing, I've seen a couple clips, man, and like apparently. I don't know how much of it is. I think it's a really bad script, but apparently also like during the filming of the fifth one, Johnny Depp was like having serious mental problems. He was like turning up drunk on set every single day, and he was a fucking like waster basically, and that's why he's not going to be in any more Pirates of the Caribbean films. But like, see when you actually see him on screen, he's like you basically can't understand what he's saying. Every word he's slurring. He's like type of thing, and like I remember I saw a clip, and it's like they're like trying to fucking. They're trying to steal a bank vault, so they do the thing. They drill holes in the side of the wall, put in chains, and they like get some sort of cart to end up. The idea is they want to pull the bank out of the wall and like drag it to the ship, kind of like a Fast Furious 5 style. Yeah, like basically it's actually directly lifted from that, but of course it doesn't quite go to plan. They end up just like lifting the entire house. Like it doesn't break through the wall. They start lifting an entire house through this town, and like Jack. Like it pulls the building away, and Jack's just standing there looking at a bunch of guards, and like this is the moment where Jack gives the one liner, the quip, and he just looks at the camera. And he's like, "That wasn't supposed to happen." That was it. He's fucking clueless in this movie, man. It is really like as I said, I've not watched the movie. I'm not going to watch it. I've seen enough adverts to say like that's not going to fucking happen. It turns out actually they've officially announced that they're going to reboot the Pirates of the Caribbean series with no Johnny Depp.
I have seen that. I thought he was still in it, but yeah, I did see they're going to reboot it.
Yeah,
but
no Johnny Depp.
And what about Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley? Are they in it?
I don't think so. I don't think so. No, I think it's like a complete reboot, and I think it's going to fucking fail abysmally. It's because it's just they can't recreate what was done before. You know,
Is it going to be
like,
the same story?
I don't know. I don't know what a reboot. Probably not. I don't know. I've not looked into it enough to be honest with you. And I think it might be quite early days yet. They basically got like the IP and the licensing and all that type of thing. But it's fucking sad news. Like I don't want to watch them on principle alone because we have a trend with where the series is going, and it's like pure. It's done that thing where like Terminator movies done it, like the Alien movies done it. Any movie series when it gets old enough, it just becomes a caricature of itself. You know, it just starts. They take the moments that you liked from the previous movies, inflate it till it's absolutely putrefying, and they just keep milking it for as much as it can, which is a bit of a fucking sad place to leave this discussion about Pirates of the Caribbean. It's because, as I said, the first three are brilliant, and I think the way to look at this is just that there only are three Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Yeah, well, in my mind there definitely are anyway, because the fourth one was a dog shit. Now that you've said that about the fifth one, I think I might have seen that one, but it was so forgettable that
Really, yeah,
I've like totally forgotten what happens in the movie. I think at the end there's like a bit where like the sea separates and they're like at the bottom of a cavern and they're like trying to get a trident or something.
They're trying to get Poseidon's trident, which contains all the sins of man or some bullshit like that. Yeah,
yeah. You can see how the first one where it was like, oh, there's a cursed in Aztec gold, and then by the fifth one it's like we're trying to get Poseidon's trident and it contains all the sins of man. It's like, and there's like they've like partied the sea, and one of them's like a ghost, and it's still Jack, and he's like, "Where's the rum gone?" And it's like,
stop it, Disney! Stop it! You're killing it.
Oh, God. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I chose to talk about for my how to keep the fans happy.